The Obama administration is doing everything it can to spin the Russia situation as nothing more than a misunderstanding between friends. Many other foreign policy experts say it is a blatant sign of Vladimir Putin's contempt for an American leader he perceives as weak. Correspondent Kevin Corke has the latest tonight from the White House.
On a day when Russian aircraft took to the skies over Syria, half a world away in Washington, the White House was ramping up its criticism of Moscow.
This highlights the fundamental contradiction in Russia's strategy. They are supporting a regime that is either unwilling or unable to carry out strikes against ISIL, and they are supporting that regime by taking strikes in areas where ISIL forces are not likely operating.
But even as the administration's frustration with the Kremlin boiled over, it's the president's strategy for the region that's facing renewed criticism.
Here's what you're going to see in the next few weeks. The Russians will begin to fly combat missions in that region, not just targeting ISIS, but in order to prop up Assad.
That was GOP presidential candidate and Florida Senator Marco Rubio 2 weeks ago. His prediction not only came true, it's reflective of the feeling of many on Capitol Hill that the Obama doctrine is failing, and they point to instability in Syria as just the latest example.
3 years ago, President Obama's opponent suggested that Russia might be our chief geopolitical threat. President Obama's response was to chuckle and say the 1980s called and wanted their foreign policy back. Unfortunately, the 1930s are calling President Obama and they want their foreign policy back.
What's less certain is how the Pentagon plans to implement the president's broader strategy for the region, while the Kremlin is forming its own regional collective. Asked today if Russia planned to join the U.S. coalition to fight against ISIS, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov suggested they'll pass.
We cannot be part of the coalition, which operates without the Security Council mandate and without the request from one of the countries on whose territories they operate.
A shot across the bow at America's strategy to operate in Syria without the approval of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Meanwhile, at the UN today, the leader of America's strongest ally in the region, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, addressed the assembly. And while U.S. Ambassador Samantha Power was not there, called out to a video conference with President Obama, Netanyahu scolded world leaders for not standing up for his tiny nation, despite repeated threats of annihilation from Iran.
The response from nearly every one of the governments represented here has been absolutely nothing. Utter silence. Deafening silence.
A powerful declaration, and that steely glare lasted 45 seconds. It was quite a moment today in New York. Meanwhile, White House officials, Bret, refused to give themselves a letter grade on the success of their Mideast policy, though they did say they were disappointed despite some areas of progress.
Kevin Corke live on the North Lawn. Kevin, thank you.